Hello, friends, and welcome to the InterWorld Podcast, where we explore the intersection of personal and collective transformation. My name is Yasha S. Wagner, and I'm a PhD researcher in the field of psychology, well-being, and spirituality, as well as a founder of the InterWorld Institute for Inner World Peace. You can learn more about our nonprofit initiatives by going to interworld.org. Today, I have the great pleasure and honor of sitting down to speak with my old friend Mariah, who also goes by Nikunja and is an incredible musical artist and a devotional artist and a knowledge teacher on the path of bhakti. So I'm very, very excited to learn more about Mariah's journey into being Nikunja, and with her music. We have all kinds of shared stories and memories from times in Colorado years ago, and can't wait to hear about the world travels and everything that's unfolded in her path. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Mariah Nikunja. Hey, sister, welcome.
Hi, so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on the podcast. How are you? How are you doing this weekend?
Good. I just got to America. I'll be here for the next 2 months. And yeah, I haven't spent much time in the United States in the last 7 years. So it's very nostalgic and also connecting with you since we have, our life has intertwined in the past in Colorado through the spiritual path specifically. So yeah, it's very auspicious timing to reconnect with you after all these years.
Yeah, likewise. I feel the same way. It's so funny. We have all these different fascinating kind of synchronistic threads of connection, I feel. Um, for example, after you took the Thai massage training with Aliona through our nonprofit here in Colorado, I guess about 9 years ago,
Wow.
you recorded a testimonial for us that we're still using. We're actually about to put it on our new website because it's so good.
No
So
way. Wow,
yeah.
amazing.
And then when I was speaking with Mariam, our mutual friend, she told me to go to the website for the Elmira Center for the tradition that you're in, and I saw your face on their homepage, and it completely blew my mind because I didn't know y'all were connected. I was like, "Wait, is that Mariah?" So you're like the face of like you're like on our website and on their website. Like, wow, Mariah's everywhere.
That's
Yeah,
hilarious.
yeah.
Wow.
Anyways, thank you for doing this and congratulations. So you just had a baby, you have a family now. That's very exciting.
Yeah. Yeah.
How's that initiation?
Whew. Yeah, initiation is the correct word for sure. I didn't really think that I would be so drawn to having children most of my life. I had more of a monastic inclination or just inclination towards my idea of what I felt focusing on the spiritual path meant. So having children was not on my radar for the longest time, but over the years it became clear that that was going to be my path for various reasons, and meeting my husband, my heart started to open up to that more and more. And yeah, it's just really blowing my mind, the process of pregnancy and giving birth, and then the early stages of newborn life, which every human being comes into the world this way. To have such a direct experience with that is so profound, so humbling, and a quality of love that I've never felt before. So, and of course, yeah, there's challenges, not really sleeping, and the day to day is dictated by what the baby needs. And if you're ready for that, to orient your life around that kind of service, which is like 24/7, it can be a very beautiful experience. But resisting that makes it very hard. So, yeah, it's been a great teacher, probably one of the greatest teachers, top 3 on the spiritual path thus far, having a baby and motherhood.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that sounds extremely transformative and also very sincere. And it helps me notice kind of the recurring themes from people, especially people that are pretty aware, sharing the experience, just this quality of love that non-parents may have no way to express it because it's like seeing a color you've never seen or something. And yet
Right.
the challenge is the challenge and the growth of the service. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. Well, congratulations. Very happy for you. Happy to see
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah, blessings to the family and the baby. And maybe one day I'll get to meet them. That'd be cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe in Elmira when you're
Yeah.
visiting.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Cool. Well, so we can definitely keep exploring all these different points of connection and things like your current family and journey. But I want to just open it up so you can introduce yourself to our listeners and share some context, your own life story and spiritual journey. I'm curious about your roots and kind of some of the highlights, the synopsis of the weaving path from where you come from to where you are now and some of the main scenery along the way.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for asking. I've was born into a very spiritual family, so the story is long. It's a long one, and there's many complex layers and details. And so I'll definitely just give the highlights for now. I actually told my story pretty in depth on another podcast. It's called Thinking Bhakti. And it's with one of my teachers, who's a disciple of my spiritual master. The podcast is with Swami Revatikanta, Thinking Bhakti. So just in case you or anybody wants to reference that, I've given my story in full there. But yeah, as I said, I was born into a very spiritual family. And so I was oriented around, just seeking answers towards existential questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Who is God? And how do I build a relationship with that in a more meaningful way? And so I think because the seed was there from the beginning, um, experience after experience, I was ultimately led to seeing a sort of unifying thread in many different traditions. It wasn't that I was Googling or researching, I want to learn about this tradition now, and now this tradition, and now this tradition. It was more just kind of how things naturally unfolded. And where I am now in Bhakti, it's called Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of love and devotion. It's actually given me the ability to see this quality of devotion that is within many traditions. Devotion to the truth, devotion to the divine in whatever way, shape, or form it manifests. And so that's been the common thread. I would say like one of the highlights would be when I was 15 in Colorado, I first started practicing yoga. And that was after, an upbringing of Christianity, Greek Orthodox Christianity. And yoga was the path that I guess just showed me that I could have a more direct relationship with Source. And eventually I felt such a conviction from the beginning to the yogic sciences and the yogic arts that I knew I wanted to be a teacher at that moment when I was 15. And once I kind of started to really focus on that more and more, I ended up living in different bhakti ashrams in 2012. And that completely reoriented my relationship to yoga itself, because yoga is a very vast system. But bhakti yoga is very specifically about a loving relationship with God, with the divine, and having that personal relationship expressed in various ways. So that seed was planted when I was 19 years old. I'm 31 now, just for context. And so once the seed of bhakti was planted, it wasn't that I then pursued yoga, and the lineage of yoga from India. There were many other traditions that came from that point on, whether it was indigenous traditions or Buddhism, whatever it may be. Like I said, that seed of bhakti was always there. And so now that my focus is more in this tradition, that was always the essence from the beginning, was this bhakti, this devotional, loving relationship to the divine. And so now it's just a journey of deepening into that, deepening into bhakti, and then also being just surprised and in awe at looking into the past and seeing those dots kind of connecting day by day.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And I feel there's some connection in my experience and some subtle level between bhakti and celebration and music. And we're both musicians. You knew me when I was in college getting out there as a hip hop artist. But I've seen you, and I said this before we started recording, I used the word blowing up, whatever that means, but your devotional bhakti music, I've started to notice is like spreading like wildfire. You've got, very high quality content, video, hundreds of thousands of plays happening on Spotify and a whole online following and so on. So I'm curious if you could share like the story behind how that happened and how that's going. And I don't know too much about it, if you're touring or how you're working with music, but it sounds great. I just started listening to it a bit before this, and I'm hooked. I'm stoked on the music. So how did that all happen?
Yeah. Well, there's many different directions I could take this. But I was born, as you can see in the background, there are 2 harps. I'm currently staying at my mother's place here in Almira, visiting her. And she is a music teacher. She was a music teacher for 30 years, classically trained on the harp and the piano. And she taught in a public school for 30 years. So I was always exposed to music from the beginning, similar to spirituality. So they were always connected, and I would sing in the choir, sing in church. And so that it was just a part of my life always. And when we met, it was actually music was a part of my spiritual life, but it was also very connected to a time in my life where I was really connected to activism and social activism, environmental activism. And so the kind of music that I was writing or listening to was more in that setting and tone of lyrics, and really using sound to bring forward a message of change that needed to happen in different spheres of the world and of society. And of course, when I first started practicing yoga, I was introduced to mantra and these things and kirtan. And so I was chanting and singing very early on, but I didn't have a deep relationship or a deep understanding of it. It wasn't until as I said before, I started living in different bhakti ashrams in 2012 in New Zealand, actually, where I had a very transcendental experience in a kirtan being a call and response devotional music meditation in which you're chanting mantra together or different divine names like Krishna or Rama, for example. And so when I was 19, I had my first, what I call natural high in a kirtan. And I was just blown away. And I didn't know anything mentally or intellectually about the path yet, or about chanting divine names for that matter. So this was very intriguing and resonated in a way beyond my mind and understanding. And so when that happens, it tends to have a deeper impact, at least I can say for me. So when I ended up coming onto the path with my current spiritual master, Paramahansa Vishwananda, which is the emphasis is Bhakti Yoga, Kirtana is it's a practice. It's a sadhana, a yogic practice for us and our path. And so there's a whole science behind it, honestly, the science of sound and not only that, but collective chanting together in community. And so, but again, when I got onto the path, it wasn't so much about like my love for music that I started to get into devotional music. I wanted to create a song. I literally just wanted to make a song with, as a way of saying thank you. Thank you to God, to my teacher, for what I had been blossoming into in that time, for what I had been receiving. It was just like a natural inclination from my heart that arose to create this as a way of saying thank you. And so that was what kind of got me into devotional music, and what I'm doing now. It was really about an offering, not so much like I'm a musician and I'm an artist and this is what I'm doing and I'm going to create it for the sake of creating. No, it was an offering, from my heart. And when I did create this and started to be more, let's say, public about it, I received a lot of just motivation from my teacher, especially, that this is something that should be shared. And I should keep going down this path of sharing devotional music and chanting divine names. So that's how it started, sharing devotional music. But in terms of like blowing up, as you were saying, I would say that it wasn't like, it's like a representation of a lifelong journey, right? And it was really just one post like that went viral. Before that, it was like I had been sharing for maybe under a year, and there was like some steady growth and, steady growing, sharing, and whatever. It wasn't necessarily my goal to blow up. However, it was a part of my intention to share, as that was the guidance from my teacher. So, but there was one, this was also at a time when reels on Instagram were like fresh, and it was like still relatively new and exciting. And now it's just like a jungle online, so it's very different. But, yeah, there was a reel that just went viral overnight. And it's a very long, beautiful story, which I could get into if you're interested, but just the core of it is interesting in that, again, it wasn't that I was seeking out to like blow up in that moment. It was like the opposite, like what this reel represented. It was a reel for Divine Mother. It was a song for Divine Mother. And a very deep song that has actually been sung. It was written by a saint, a yogic saint, and has been sung by other what are called Baal singers. I'm not sure if you've heard of the Baal tradition.
Yeah,
Yes.
actually, Trevor Hall was talking about it in an interview that's on the same, I interviewed Trevor Hall about one of his albums, and he was talking a lot about that tradition. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so your listeners kind of already know, but the Baal, they're like, yeah, they're these, I guess, wandering minstrels that just sing the names of the divine, that completely give their life to sharing and becoming an instrument, literally, with their voice, their body, everything. And the Baal songs are so sacred. It's not something that you can just Google and learn and look up the lyrics. It's like you study with a master, and you immerse yourself in one song for years and years and years and years. Like 12 years you have to be working with a master there before you can even go out and share a Baal song, traditionally speaking. So this song that I had received from another spiritual brother, it has that kind of depth. I don't know how it got to me. I'm a nobody. Like, I am like, I have so much respect for the Baal and how they are preserving that sacred tradition in a time where there's so much dilution of the sacredness of certain aspects of the spiritual journey. So this song that went viral has been sung by other Baal singers, and it's a song that is extremely close to my heart. Like, it would bring me to tears every time that I sing it. And so when this reel went out, like, the last thing on my mind was like, oh, I hope that this like checking to see how many views or likes or whatever. It was like totally just an offering to Divine Mother, to that mysterious force of creation, of Mother Nature, of that presence that is taking care of us infinitely. And it was the day that it started to go viral, like just skyrocketing. I was supposed to be performing that evening, and it was a very important moment for me because I was going to be sharing for the first time a project I've been working on, singing the Bhagavad Gita in English. Those of you that probably many know what the Bhagavad Gita is on your platform, but the Bhagavad Gita is an ancient scripture from India, and it's basically about who am I, what am I here for, and how to build a relationship with the divine. But so this is originally in Sanskrit, but I'm singing the verses and summarizing the chapters in English in modern compositions. And I had been working on it for years. And this was the day I was supposed to perform it for the first time. And I got super sick and lost my voice completely. So I couldn't perform. I couldn't share. And I was recognizing the gift that it is to even be able to sing, to use our voice, to share, because at that moment I couldn't. But at the same time, this was when that post went viral. And sometimes with reels, your reel just gets, millions of views and it's whatever. You don't get any followers from that. But there was like just a very consistent turnover of like views to followers, and it was just going up within a few days.
Wow.
And so for me, as an artist, of course, when you are an artist, there's I think a natural tendency to be like, I want to share, I want to reach lots of people, and and an artist is always looking for feedback too, like, oh, was it good? Did you like it? I think it's hard to avoid that as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
But a big part of bhakti and the path of bhakti is like, it's just offering with love. It's not about being seen or about being perfect in the craft per se. So that's kind of like the blowing up, I feel, for me was only because it represented for me the grace of the divine. It didn't have much to do with like my efforts. Of course I put an effort within the journey spiritually, let's say, but like it wasn't so much about like the external superficial details that go into going viral or something like this, or getting a lot of numbers or traction online. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, so much sense. And it's actually, I think it's a blessing to the world that kind of thing can happen when things are even more authentic, that sometimes they can reach more people, that they're not just packaged or manipulated to do that, but sometimes we can actually see the real, and we're so starved for the real that then, no pun intended, not the real
I
with
know.
an
I
A.
was like,
But yeah, so when we see what is something that's really real, we tend to need to go towards that, because those platforms are sometimes designed in a way that leaves us looking for the authenticity, and then when we see it there, we're like, oh wow, this is it, this is what I was looking for.
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm fidgeting. My computer charger port just fell out. I'm trying to push it back
Oh,
in.
good.
All
Yeah,
right.
good to go. Great.
Yeah.
The Trevor Hall interview I mentioned, he said some very similar things, which I think is interesting because now, Trevor Hall may be one of the few people in the world that's like booked to headline Red Rocks every year. It's pretty wild. But when I was speaking with him about this, he kind of said that he gets like a writer's block if he thinks about the crowds too much, and that it's really his devotional and authentic creativity where he gets himself out of the way, that works, and the rest doesn't even work. It's not functional when he tries to force it to get a certain result. So it's definitely a teaching there about like what happens if we can just hold our intentions lightly and kind of surrender to the spirit, detach from the results, focus on the actual core intention, like not the results or the fruits, but send it out there for the benefit of whatever our actual prayer was, and see what happens. Yeah, very beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that. There's a lot of topics I know I want to get into, and this is such rich territory to keep exploring. But before we do, I also do want to leave space, since you mentioned that you could share more about the story. Also, people sometimes share music on the podcast. So if there was anything you wanted to add before we move on from the reel itself for the Divine Mother, you mentioned that that's an option. So I don't know if you missed any of that actual song or prayer or story, but you're welcome to share whatever is left there before we do move on.
Okay, sure. Thanks for the invitation. Yeah, well, the song is a sort of, it's a recognition of the mystery of creation, of God, of Divine Mother, and the lyrics are pointing to that. Like sometimes you're red, sometimes you're blue, sometimes you're yellow, sometimes you're black, sometimes you're spirit, sometimes you're matter, sometimes you're the transcendent void beyond both. And I find it to be just a really beautiful representation of the positioning of yourself on the path, like to be okay with the mystery, not only okay, but in awe and in reverence and in love with the mystery. And beyond the words themselves, there's a certain sound and tonality that's transmitted through the music itself, which I believe can only arise from like a space of true inner silence. And so like the difference between a devotional song written by a saint and a pop song written by somebody who's coming from the mind and just crafting something from the mind to sound good for a specific result, is that there's the saint who's situated in a state of inner silence, and then the person that's coming from a more mental and perhaps egotistical place. And that is going to affect the sound itself, whether we're aware of it or not. And that sound will affect us, whether we're aware of it or not. And so, as I was saying, there's a whole science behind sound and chanting, kirtan, mantra, etc., that is connected to this. And I feel that the Baal songs, for example, are so in tune with that just state of inner silence, or even the cosmic sound, which maybe we've heard of it as Om or within this tradition. But how this can really tune our body as an instrument and our being to the rhythm of nature even is super, super profound. And so, I guess I would just add that as a final thought, and how for me, I'm also very connected to silence meditation, as this was some of the most impactful practices that I've done in my journey. And I'm more and more seeing the connection between silence and true transcendental sound, right? So there's actually, in our tradition, it's understood that there are 4 different levels of sound. It's called vak. And there's sound that's like the most gross level of sound, which is just talking, the words that come out, the audible sounds. And then there's the more thought shapes that take form. And then there's even more the subtle current of that thought that starts to take shape, that comes initially from what could be said as the heart. But even beyond that is that transcendental sound. It's called paravak. And so actually, Bao songs, or the mantra or divine name, it can resonate on all those levels. But what it truly is, in essence, is that paravak, that transcendental sound, which is, for us, non-different from source, from Divine Mother, from God, from Parabrahman is what it's called. So, it's like there is so much depth to it. And in my experience, it's a process of actually slowing down enough to tune into the silence before transmitting the sound, before it comes out, and that can be through music, and that can also be just how we live our life, really becoming an instrument of the divine in the way that we speak to one another. And that's one thing my spiritual master says, is that speaking is like the lowest form of communication, just like gross conversation. And there's so many rich and deep dimensions of communication that are happening at any given moment, or that we have and can have access to. And, but in the modern day, especially with technology and everything, it's very difficult to access that. And so that's why it is said that chanting the divine name is one of the easiest ways to attain liberation, or to build a relationship with the divine. And I can't say that that's why, but I definitely feel a part of it.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. It's such an exciting conversation for me already. I helped publish a book for a friend of mine that's called Elements of Sound. He's a sound healer and a musician. And I was telling you off camera or before we started recording, that so many of these episodes unexpectedly keep coming back to music and yoga and sound healing as a tradition. And I love what you're sharing about the deeper, ancient underlying knowledge and technology behind those topics, this knowledge of the nature of silence in relation to vibration and sound, and how essential that is in an actual, like, embodied active way in our lives, kind of studying and understanding the silence, the space between the different dimensions of language and communication that are happening. It's one of the reasons we wanted to have a video component to the podcast, at least if we can't do it in person, because, most of the communication isn't in the intellectual concepts of the language and the thoughts. And I agree that music can help take us past that into the pure vibration of the sound, because, it's in the spaces between the body language and even subtle things when we're in person with people that we don't see or notice with our normal senses, that are absolutely and scientifically proven now to be happening, electrical signals and chemical signals and all kinds of things that are happening. So it's been cheapened for sure with texts and and all of that. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is meant to be an educational podcast. There's definitely some other topics I want to come back to at the end, but while we're here, I actually want to invite you to go even deeper into this topic of mantra, in particular kirtan, satsang. Maybe you can, in a basic way, help define some of these terms, like, intro to what it all means, kind of 101 definitions. We're actually building an academy, so it would be great, to even collaborate with you in the future as well, in various ways we can come back to. But I just want to invite you to educate us a bit on that difference for right now between like the sacred music you're speaking to, the power of the syllables, the magical sacred languages, the difference between that and like the performative concerts, and share about the group practice of the chanting. Maybe you can go a little further into all of that for us.
Sure, yeah.
Like even specific mantras or teachings about Om, like all these things I think would be enlightening for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, such a rich topic, but I guess one piece, like educational piece that I know was helpful for me in terms of recognizing the practical relevance of chanting mantra or singing kirtan is to really just, look at what is a mantra. Mantra is, like the etymology of it, is really a mind tool. Okay, it's a tool for the mind or an instrument for the mind. And what is the mind? I guess you are in psychology, so you have one definition of it. But in our tradition, in yogic thought, the mind is actually broken down into 4 parts. And it's not the first part is what we in the West traditionally understand as mind. Okay. But what it's actually called, and what maybe our listeners can remember, is antakarana. Have you heard of this before?
I've heard of these topics, but not the word antakarana.
Okay. Antakarana means the inner instrument. Okay. So the antakarana is, for us, the mind, but the fullness of the mind. And it's broken down into 4 parts. The first one is manas. Manas is the part of the inner instrument that is taking in information through the senses, sense perception. And then there is the buddhi. Buddhi is the intellect, right? The refined sort of intellectual capacity. And then there is chitta. Chitta is, in simple terms, the subconscious. And the chitta is where different experiences or memories, or what we call impressions, which are samskaras, the Sanskrit term, they are stored inside of the chitta, which is the subconscious. And then finally, there's the ahankar. The ahankar is the false ego, or it's the sense of I, the sense of I, me, mine. And this ahankar gets its power through this antakarana, let's say. It's like the driving force, the false ego. Now, if we are living our life from a place of I need to gain more power for myself, I need to, just a very strong sense of I, that information is constantly being stored in your subconscious. And that is what is going to shape your identity. But what in our path, chanting mantra or singing kirtan is creating what are called devotional samskaras, or even more simply put, positive samskaras, positive impressions inside of the chitta, inside of the subconscious. It's very simple, actually. It's just helpful to have the terminology very neatly organized like this. And why is it important? Because if we're going to use mantra, then we need to understand what is the mind, because a mantra is a tool for the mind. And why would we need to have a tool for the mind? Because if we are not in a conscious relationship to this antakarana, this inner instrument, then we are just going to be unconsciously driven by the false ego, the ahankar, that takes shape from the chitta, the subconscious realm. I think many of us have seen that image of the glacier, where the glacier is super thick and deep under the ocean, and that's the subconscious. but the tip of the glacier is a very small piece, and that's the conscious mind. So the subconscious is really driving the show. And if we have, if we are constantly living our life in a way that's like egotistically driven, materialistically driven, for more power, more this, more that, then that false ego is going to be continuing that pattern. But when we create more positive impressions within our chitta, our subconscious, then we are more, that false ego starts to let go, starts to loosen its grip, and we're able to perceive something that is beyond that mind. And that gets into the realm of, different belief systems, right? Like, what is beyond the mind then? Is there a soul? Is there a self? Is there no self? For our tradition, we believe that there is a self. It's called the Atma. And I know that you've talked about this before with other people. It's the soul. So to chant mantra, to sing kirtan, it is really a science of creating positive, devotional, divine impressions in our subconscious so that we aren't so absorbed in this false ego identification, so that we can be our true self. We can be in alignment with our soul. And we then can become an instrument of the divine versus an instrument of the ego, as opposed to an instrument of the ego, which my teacher actually often says that musicians create the most karma out of anyone in the world. They have the capacity to create the most karma. So if you like a musician that's like a pop star, that's like repeating very materialistic lyrics over and over again, and then creating that impression for thousands of people, millions of people around the world, the ripple effect is profound. I mean, we all know how easy it is for music to get stuck in our head. We don't need to understand yogic science or psychology to know that. Music gets stuck in our head. And what does that even mean? It's in our chitta. So this is like the beauty and the simplicity of chanting mantras, which are, they're positive. They're positive sound vibrations, as opposed to very superficial vibrations that can come from pop music. I don't know why I'm using I like some pop music. I don't know why I'm using that as an example. But, just for the contrast. It's more about the lyrics. It's not about the genre of the sound, let's say. I think lyrics have more importance. The sound is important, but I think lyrics have a heavier weight. So did you want to say something?
I just wanted to interject that Andre 3000, who I've been blessed to connect with a few times. Actually, I've heard him share that he doesn't, he's part of, Outcast, but he shares that he doesn't, I've heard him speak about not even listening to rap music anymore because of the thought forms in the words and just not wanting to connect with that in terms of the language and the lyrics in his mind anymore, which I think is interesting coming from one of the biggest.
That can bring up old, what are called samskaras, we would say in our tradition, because like sound that is associated with different memories will bring up those impressions from the subconscious, from the chitta, and then kind of compel us to act from that old place, and probably a place that it sounds like he wanted to be in a different place.
Maybe that's why his new album is all just Native American flute music. He'll always be a rap legend, but I think it's a cool transition to look at. Anyways, I didn't mean to interrupt. We can go back. Yeah.
No, it's good. It's good. Concrete examples are always good. But just to kind of, I guess, conclude that point, the main takeaway being, this antakarana, this inner instrument, learning how to tune that inner instrument, which is, in our understanding, the mind, comes from creating positive impressions in our subconscious, in the chitta. And so that is where mantra comes in. That is where chanting divine names come in. And it's such a deep science. I don't want to pretend like I know it in the fullness. But one thing I can say, just in the difference from like a mantra, like what's Om, you said Om, but also like Gayatri mantra, many people know that. Om Bhurvasvaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimai Dhiyo Yana Prachodayat. This is a very famous mantra. Versus a divine name like Krishna. There's a difference in that Krishna is non-different from Krishna himself, from God himself. And there's a totally different relationship that is created from chanting a divine name that makes that more personal. That is where kirtan is specifically a bhakti sadhana. Because you can chant mantra in many different yogic lineages. But in bhakti yoga, as I said before, the emphasis is on building a personal relationship to God. And so therefore, chanting the name of God is of more importance than chanting a mantra, which can bring about different like metaphysical reactions, let's say. Though that does happen also, but that's not the goal. And so the mantra that my spiritual teacher has given, Shri Vithala Giridhari Parabrahmane Namaha, is actually it's like a string of divine names in one. And so everything that we've spoken about already before, the recommendation is to have one mantra or one divine name, because there's so many out there and it's amazing. Like you can chant them all, but there's emphasis and importance on dedicating yourself to one and going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into that one. And I think that is also speaks also to the spiritual path, at least in my journey. After having been in many different traditions and also living in a day and age where we have access to learning many different traditions, it's beautiful to do that. And from my experience, I see how important it is to choose one and go deep into it. And maybe you don't necessarily choose it from the mind, like it chooses you. I feel that way about being where I'm at. But yeah, so it's like the spiritual path or a mantra, choose one and go deep into that, into the sacredness of that. And we can talk about the science all day and like the structure of the mind and the tendencies and the mechanisms of the mind, which is important. But ultimately, what we're talking about here is something transcendental, you know, and ultimately, at the end of the day, will not be understood by the mind. Yeah.
Wow. This is very important information and insight more than information. Yeah. And it's also, I feel I completely agree with you about the importance when it really comes down to it of commitment and devotion, and also having guidance, right? Having teachers or a teacher, having kind of a home base, a focus, a narrow path. We get in the new age this incredible opportunity to learn from many different cultures. And there are even lineages and traditions that are universal or interspiritual now and combine different transmissions. But the transmission and the initiation and the training itself has to be there. There has to be this intergenerational, ancestral, timeless chain that's passed directly for the real transformation and alchemy to happen, I feel. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important to find that home base or commitment, community, and so on, so that whichever place you're in, not that it's better or worse, but that it's serving a particular purpose for your particular soul and character, to work with that. source of guidance and community. So I agree with that. And I want to say that as an interspiritual initiate myself, let's say, I also noticed that what you're talking about with the importance of like being given a mantra or having your own mantra to go deep with, that is actually a very universal practice. I think, I hear the same thing in TM, transcendental meditation, and even in Tibetan Buddhism. It's like you might be given a particular empowerment by a teacher that like, oh, this deity is the one for you to visualize and work with, and this mantra to repeat for your personal tendencies and so on. So I do think that that's common to different traditions, and even in the West, right? We have these esoteric teachings about names and like the power of names and the magic of incantations and spells. And I feel that so strongly, especially with the more secret mantras and people like yourself who have this incredible ability to learn and share more advanced multi-syllable mantras and things. It's like there's this powerful effect on the psyche when you listen to that and feel it resonate. It's very magical, and invoking names like that, I think, is a very literally magical practice. So I don't know if you want to kind of wrap up this topic at all with speaking to the Om. I'm not an expert, and I don't know if you are, but we kind of grazed over it, and I think it would be a fun topic to touch on. We haven't really, I don't think, deconstructed any meaning or teachings about that on this podcast. So while we're here on mantras, it seems like the perfect time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, like in a way of breaking it down structurally, but in our tradition, Om is the cosmic sound. It's the sound of all creation, and everything within nature is resonating within this sound. Even it is said, like, I just got our first family of bees, which I'm super excited about. Obviously, we're being helped through the whole process with someone who's been working with the bees for 50 years. But yeah, I've heard it said that bees are attuned to that sound. And so I guess what I can say that maybe isn't perhaps, because I think many people have heard this or seen this symbol, especially nowadays, everyone practicing yoga in some capacity. Om specifically is in the Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna says that I am the syllable Om. Now we can look at Om and break down the vibrational components of it, which has been done. But ultimately, how it was arisen and how it was perceived was from the rishis, from the sages that were, as I said before, in that state themselves. So they could then perceive that. They could perceive that transcendental sound. And this was, repeated throughout time. So that's where it emerged. It wasn't that there was a study, an external study of like, what is the sound of creation? It was first the yogis and the rishis coming into that state and perceiving it from within. Now, there are many, many, many different practices that there are to chant Om or to work with Om. But one thing that I can say that's a little bit more like tangible and even physical is how it resonates, like if people are more scientifically oriented and they're like, ooh, divine name, like God, like what is that? That's not okay. Just think about it. Life is vibration. It's very simple. And there's the way that our nervous system is designed, our body is designed, is to be sensitive to that. So there have been many studies around how Om vibrates and impacts the vagus nerve. Okay, the vagus nerve in our brainstem, no? And so how this can bring you into different states of calmness, let's say. I don't want to get too into the complicated terminology because it's actually really not necessary. My sort of practice nowadays is simplicity being the ultimate sophistication. That is credited to Leonardo da Vinci, that quote. I don't know if he actually said it. But yeah, it's like, for me, when you just sit still for a second and observe. This is a practice that we do in silence meditation with my teacher. For an entire day, we sit and we do something called observation of mind. There's no chanting, there's no practice. You're just sitting and observing. And from that place of observation, we can see, we can feel, we can sense what's going on. And, but many of us are not, I guess, perhaps educated on the importance of doing that because of the times that we're living in and how busy we all are and how stimulated we all are. But just because the rishis perceived this many thousands of years ago doesn't mean that it's not possible now. Mm-hmm. But what I've noticed is that there's this pursuit to study, and it's amazing. And I have the same nature. And it's helpful also when we're more mentally oriented to actually see when science starts to prove what the ancient rishis and sages and whatever great beings, enlightened beings felt from direct experience. That's very exciting. But the most impactful thing for me was to just be willing to have the experience of it and see, okay, from an observation of mind, see how busy your mind is. Okay, that's a data point. Like, whoa, my mind is crazy. Like, what is that? But, layer by layer, we start to feel something. We feel the vibration. It sounds very like airy-fairy woo-woo, but it's not. It's just matter of fact. Like in my first silent retreat, I was like, literally my whole body was vibrating like crazy after the first couple of days of being in silence, because I was directly experiencing creation as vibration. But when we're so stimulated all the time, everything gets concentrated here mentally, intellectually, and we cannot feel, we cannot perceive the depth of that om, like that cosmic sound. Like om is just, it's a syllable, there are syllables, you can break it down. But like what it represents is that cosmic sound of all that is. And we can try to mentally understand it till the end of time, but it's kind of pointless. It's not pointless. Okay, I won't say it's pointless, but what's even more interesting is when we just finally have the experience of it directly, because the mind will never believe it anyway. Like believe that there's this profound cosmic sound that brings us into the most ecstatic harmony with all of life. Be like, oh, really? That sounds cool, but like that's not going to happen for me. Like that's how the mind tends to be, Yeah. But in my experience, like simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Just observe what's going on in my mind. The antakarana, as I said before, the inner instrument. You are an instrument of the divine. And Om is what you are, actually. Mm-hmm. So there are practices in which you can flip that and see, that you are vibrating from that cosmic sound. Mm-hmm. And it can sound like very fantastical and mystical, and it is, and it's also just nature. Mm-hmm. So the more that we give ourselves the opportunity to be still and observe, and then layer by layer tune into that cosmic sound, we don't need to understand it. We just become that. And so, but the sort of tangible impact that chanting Om, for example, has on our physiology and on the vagus nerve, it changes our state of being to a calm state of being. And when we're calm, then we're clear. And when we're clear, there's more harmony Okay, there's more harmony, you live more peacefully, like from a very basic level. If you're not a spiritual person, like you can be more peaceful and it's fine. And of course, more can emerge from that, more mysteries. And again, like I mentioned Krishna, because for me, I'm on the path of bhakti. And Krishna says, I am the syllable Om. But he also speaks about how, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to, through your own efforts and practices, to arrive to that place of like truly your true self, through just sitting and observing, or like the more introspective paths. It's possible, and it's good to do it. Like I was just saying, it's really important to do it because you need to have those experiences to grow, to just have reference and context for the journey itself. But Krishna also says in the Gita that like beyond all of this, what I recommend is bhakti, for these times especially, and devotional practice to the divine. You wanted to say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I thought I heard you gasp there. And why, though? Because in the Gita, and this is just a perspective, right? This is coming from my tradition. There's many ways to also interpret the Gita itself, but Krishna often talks about grace, the element of grace in our life. And how grace, when you just give yourself with love in service to the divine, then grace can just be bestowed upon you without sitting for 20,000 years in the, 20,000 lifetimes meditating, trying to access this inner silence and, perceive the cosmic sound. That's a path, that's a way. But to just live your life in devotion and love to God, to the mystery, and just live for the sake of loving, that grace can be bestowed upon you, in which you are then resonating from that place, that cosmic sound, but you're not so attached to that in the first place because you just want to build a loving relationship with that, with God, So, like it's, Om is a very complex in terms of like the different angles that you can study it. And but these are, I guess this is just the perspectives that I wanted to share, and like my direct experience also. And what I would recommend is more direct experience without the need to understand it so much from the mind space, and see how vibration itself has an impact on our state of being. And Om happens to be the specific vibration that brings us into a better, simply put, better state of being. So, that's a perspective, a way to look at something that is extremely complex, but make it more simple and accessible.
Da Vinci style.
Yeah, I think you said it. I don't know. You never really know with the internet, but I always loved that.
I love it. His diagrams were very complex, though, but I guess there's a simplicity behind it.
There's a lot of those. What do you call it? What's the word?
Paradox.
Paradox, exactly. That's the word.
Yeah, it's the cosmic paradox. Yeah, there's a lot of them. I think everything's made out of that.
Yeah.
These intertwined paradoxes. That it's like, I love how you said the sound of all that is. It's amazing to reflect how music and sound and creativity, even expression, can go in the direction of amplifying the ego when it's an expression of how busy we are, becomes that we're so busy inside we try to sit and then our mind is very busy, as opposed to how that creativity can actually dissolve us into the all that isness of nature, and how that is like this natural, inherent, universal union between the creator and the creation and the creativity, and it's all a continuous process. So yeah, it's very beautiful. And like the grasping with the mind, as you said, it's not pointless because it just leads us to the point of exhausting that, and seeing the emptiness of that, and then going into the experience. And I remember I was sitting once around a fire and we were singing a lot of these sacred songs, which are very present also in the native traditions and the indigenous practices. And like the sacred native songs, if you can just sit around together, the fire, and just keep singing and sing more and more and go into the music and into the songs. And it gave me this image of the more we just keep going into that, it felt like it was a washing machine for the mind. Like I was in a tumbler, like it's a washer, and it's just cleaning out the other thought forms and constant internal dialogue that the ego is kind of falsely constructed out of, all of
Absolutely.
that inner chatter, and simplifying instead into just the song, the presence of being of the song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's like literally the Bhagavad Gita means the divine song or the song of God, right? So there's a
Mm,
theme here around
mhm,
song, instrument, sound. Maybe that's
mhm,
why it keeps coming up in your
mhm,
podcast. It must be
mhm.
important to this
Definitely.
interdisciplinary conversation, you know?
Exactly. That's a good point. It's like,
Yeah.
how do we study what the podcast is trying to tell us instead of trying to make it something, it's
Uh,
interdisciplinary, but somehow this divine song just wants to come through it. I love that. And I think it's also very universal. It's like there's the Song of Songs in the Bible, and the elements of
Yeah.
sound that I
Yeah.
mentioned helping publish it. The publishing house was founded by a Sufi master, and also it has some books from Hazrat Inayat Khan, who's in that Sufi
Mm,
lineage and wrote the mysticism of sound and music. So it's definitely, all humans, it seems, all over the world throughout time have noticed from the beginning that, there's something to not just words and language. We have all these systems like mathematics and symbols and so on, but sacred prayer through song and through sound and silence and their interplay seems to be very important, very central, to
yeah.
these things. So yeah,
Yeah,
and
and I
and
just want
then
to
the
say, like,
satsang.
I want to say
Mm-hmm.
it's not pointless to learn and to
Mm-hmm.
study.
Mm-hmm.
That just slipped. That just slipped out. But in
Mm-hmm.
like the point, I think that I was trying to make is that, and this is often said by my spiritual teacher, um, that experience first is so critical. Experience first, knowledge second. So have the
Mm.
experience, like give yourself the opportunity to experience. For me, it's important to find a master, a teacher, and learn, choose a path, commit to something, have the experiences, and then, you know, then study, analyze, observe it, read different scriptures that are associated with it, and then find those connecting points from that foundation of experience. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and that's also for me, I'm speaking from experience in
Mm-hmm.
pursuing studying existential truths or universal truths even, um, prematurely before having enough experiences. Like even when I was 15, I was like, I'm ready to teach yoga now, and honestly, I'm 31 now, and I'm like, oh wait, okay, I'm an eternal student, that's right, and I'm just sharing from experience. So
Mm-hmm.
that's what I think. When I slip and said it's pointless, it's not. It's just, you know being clear of how to approach it more effectively.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was actually saving this for the end, but I might as well say it now since you're stepping in to defend education and learning and study. The school we're creating, it's meant to be interdisciplinary and experiential in emphasis
Mm,
in many ways. And it's a hybrid academy, online courses and in-person retreats and so on. But I just want to
amazing.
plant a seed right now, for the possibility of collaboration. I don't know how your life looks with your tradition, how you all teach and share within the tradition versus with the public and collaborate with other organizations. But I just want to plant a seed for the possibility, if it works out and we find some sort of mutually beneficial arrangement for you to teach in our school, like a course or something on these topics. I'd love to talk about that. And for you to share, to perform or lead some sort of kirtan at like a Heartfire festival. We're changing now to InterWorld events, but we'd love to book you. We can talk to your manager, and we're definitely becoming even more active now. So it'd be great to keep you in mind and keep you in the loop for that, and have you share such valuable insight, knowledge, and music at our events and through our school. So I just wanted to mention that in case it's possible at some moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I find that I get so much joy from sharing, what I've learned, what I've studied, but it becomes more enriching the more experience that I have, and so this is also like I just have to give a deep bow and reverence to all my teachers for that, and the very important recognition of, where we receive like genuine, like you said, people are craving the real, and that was something that was just like, gosh, when we met, that's what I was craving. I was like, God, I'm just craving the real. Like, where's the real? Like, where's the real? And there was that like infinite kind of like question, looping. And it ultimately led me to so many different beautiful paths and experiences. And ultimately to my teacher, Paramamsa Vishwananda, where you truly see the importance of reverence and humility, being a key ingredient on the path, of study, of spiritual study, of sacred study. And being and sharing from that place of reverence and respect for the experiences that you've been given throughout your journey. So, thank you for the invitation, and I would love to. I don't know if who you or anyone's going to be around the New York area, but I can extend the invitation to the events that we're having here also with our spiritual teacher that are happening in the next 2 months, in August and September, through Bhakti Marga. Specifically the Soul Awakening program, which is September 11th through the 14th. I don't know if you're around or you are going to visit your family, but I would definitely say that this is such a beautiful opportunity, the Soul Awakening program with our teacher, which is really giving you such tangible ways to what we discussed to create positive impressions in our life and just bring us closer to the real, meaningful, real experiences.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Well, another thing to mention briefly in here while we're at it is a little shout out. So I know that, well, when we met, you came to the Thai massage training with Aliona, who I think you just saw in Europe with Mariam at a festival. I think I saw you all together there, but
I didn't get the chance to see her, but I did see that she came out. Yeah.
Okay. But anyways, we'll come back to all that in a sec. To decompress and wrap up here, I know you have to go soon, but I just wanted to mention some shout outs. I think if you get a chance, I don't know when they're there, but I know you're in Elmira now at the ashram, and our tradition has a community in New York as well. And some of my close friends, Brooke and Shola, will be there. So if you see them, say hello. And I think if they see you, they'll say hello. And then also while we're on shout outs, I don't know if you know her, Feather Groves, but I here in Colorado Springs was just saw her yesterday and told her I was recording with you in the morning, and she said to say hello. So hi from Feather on the Colorado side of things, just to keep your nostalgic visit going, totally. Theme going here. We all say hello. And I was remembering that speaking of these moments along the path and our journey and what we're looking for over the years, you actually were generous enough to gift me a very special feather a very long time ago when you found these feathers. And I ended up passing that intentionally to Ishel Prisma, who's another amazing devotional musician like yourself, in the universal approach to music. And her and Jerry are arriving here in a few days and doing a sound bath in Colorado with us. So, and I know they really appreciated the feather too.
That is
all
amazing.
those
Can
years
you
ago.
remind me,
Yeah.
because I love that you're bringing this up just as like a, I don't know, nostalgic finale of our conversation, but yeah, how we initially met and how I honestly can't even remember how you invited me to do this Thai massage training. But
I honestly don't remember either. I feel like I sometimes promote events at Ecstatic Dances like Rhythm Sanctuary. I feel like we both
yeah,
have attended some things like that. I know you, and I remember at one point Connor Ryan was managing my music
no
when I was
way.
releasing hip hop, and I was so flattered because he told me like, and I don't think I've ever told you this. I remember it from many years ago. We were hanging out when he was managing for me, and he was like, I was talking to Mariah. I think you have some real potential. She said that you remind her of MC Yogi vibes when she listened to your album. And you were like, you sent me some nice compliments about that first album. You called it a magnum opus and stuff. So I remember like all these different things where there's
Yeah.
dances and you heard my music, and then somehow you came to the Thai massage training, which maybe as some of our final decompression here at the end, I wanted to ask you what happened with that, because after we interviewed you, you said that, in the short testimonial version, you said that you were like actually taking that and starting to travel the world and share these like wellness practices and body work. So I'm so curious to hear how that world travel happened and like, where did you go with that after the Thai massage training? Because
Oh
that
my
was one of the
goodness.
first trainings we organized here. And then it's so cool that someone went professional with it and traveled. Yeah.
I think we're gonna have to do a part two
I
because
think so. This is
that's a
too,
whole
yeah.
nother conversation. But
Yeah.
what I can say, since you mentioned the feather, which feather did I give you?
I don't know. I don't want
It's
to
like
get into all the,
okay.
yeah, go ahead. Yeah. I know that Ishel has permission to carry these special feathers, and you found them and wanted them to go to the right place. And so they ended
Okay.
up there. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, so the reason I'm bringing it up is because I was thinking about our initial connection and before getting on this podcast, and how like in the Bhagavad Gita, there's a verse where Krishna says that in whatever way one surrenders, in whatever way one approaches me, in that way I come to them. So during that time when we met, I was more connected to the indigenous path, and I was being communicated with or approached by the divine in that way, because at that time, that's what I was really connecting to and resonating with. And one of the ways that I was being sort of communicated with or visited by the divine was through the bird tribes, through birds. Very sacred birds, let's say. So it was just one after the other of very beautiful and sacred bird, let's say, companions, which in the indigenous traditions, which I know you know, are very sacred depending on, which tradition or lineage that we're talking about. But at the finale of the Thai massage training, the very last day, I was walking into the session and I spotted an eagle. I don't know if you remember this or if you were there, but I spotted an eagle. And Aliona came out and we were just observing this beautiful eagle together. And before that, I was studying with a Native American shaman, and she told me that, when the eagle comes to you, it means you're ready to lead. And I had, like, as I was saying, there were many different birds that I'd found and taken the feathers in a very prayerful and ceremonial way. And from hawks to owls to the final moment was after this Thai massage training where we saw this beautiful eagle. Then I was, I came upon a golden eagle, And this was right before I met my husband and my spiritual teacher. So it was like, I felt like there was a passing of the torch in a way from one season of the journey to the next. And how, just tying it into that Gita verse where Krishna says, in whatever way, we approach the divine, that's how, I come to you. And that's how and that's where we can see the beauty of the various traditions that are out there and the many ways that people build a relationship to the divine, and to the beauty of nature. So I definitely want to say thank you to that time in my life, and the relevance that it had in being like a transitionary moment into where I am now, like a catalyst into where I am now. And just I have to say, like, my husband that I ended up meeting, it's a funny fact, but like, he literally was praying to be with someone who could give him Thai massages on the road. So like, I literally learned this for you. I learned this for you. Like, we joke about it all the time. And probably if he listens to this, he's like, yeah, when was my last Thai massage? It's been a while.
That's
just
hilarious.
To be honest, but
yeah,
I'm super grateful. And at that time I was just really keen on really adding a lot of things to my tool belt in terms of ways to be of service to others, whether it's through well-being or on the spiritual path. So
yeah. Well, leading into this interview, there was a hawk that flew right over my car, like very, very close, just last night when I was driving to the eco village, to our land here at the InterWorld Eco Village. And while we were, and as I'm speaking right now, there's like a group of birds kind of murmuring in our yard right here in front of the window. And one flew really close while you were speaking earlier. And I was just noticing that and observing these birds. So, and they sing too, so I think we should call it a day. But as you said, I think we'll need a part 2. This is one of those interviews where it could just keep going. One of those special episodes. So thank you so much. I guess my last question to finish it up, because I know you have to get back to your family and your beautiful baby. I don't know his name yet. I don't remember, but and I'm curious to someday cross paths again and meet your child. And my last question was, you mentioned your mother's in Elmira, and I know you know this from our friend Mariam, but my father is in Elmira. I don't know if your mother's there for anything related to the ashram, but I stayed at the ashram for a night the last time I went to visit my father. I have all these connections to the Northeast, and I guess I'm just curious, what that is, and I'm curious about your ancestry. I'm not asking you what that is. I'm just generally naming that. I'm curious what that. Elmira of all places, right? We have the same joke about our eco village here. It's like, Amsterdam is nice, but have you heard of Ellicott? It's like really rural Colorado. But anyways, what's I guess I'm just wondering what your background is and your ancestry and why your family's in Elmira, and wondering.
Well, there's I feel like there's this, I guess something I've been playing with in my spiritual practice, and just even in my mind, is like, what does it mean to really be indigenous? And it's a deep topic, but as I've been saying, I was part of different indigenous traditions and really connected to them still to this day. But there was one definition that I saw about indigenous that I really loved, which was being indigenous, meaning sprung from the earth. And so that felt to me, I loved it because of the universality of it. And so my ancestry or indigenous roots have nothing to do with Elmira, but it's more about the spiritual thread, the spiritual ancestry. And my mom lives here. There are many reasons why she lives here, but of course she is also connected to the spiritual community here with my teacher in the ashram. She was very close to it, and which is really lovely for her. But also she has a past of going to college here and meeting my father here, not in Elmira, but not far away in Binghamton. So there's like a thread there for her. My parents met here, and my dad grew up in New York. And then they moved to Colorado, which is where they had me, and I grew up there. But yeah, it's a bit random, like why we ended up in New York and this and that. But it's not really related to, my roots. Like on my mom's side, it's all Western Europe, Norwegian, Swiss kind of mix. And on my dad's side, East Africa. So I have African ancestry. But yeah, it's really interesting because as I've said, I've been spiritually connected to so many different traditions that don't necessarily have to do with like my blood ancestry. And yeah, I mean, that kind of opens up a conversation of, like where does the inclination and connection, to different traditions that are not from your, blood lineage, where does that come from? Like, where does that arise from? Why is someone who's born in Colorado practicing something from India? Like, I don't think that there's a coincidence for those things. I do feel that there's a spiritual magnetism that each individual has for a reason, and that can be spoken about and explained actually through the Gita also. But just to bookmark that as like maybe something we talk about in the future. Yeah, the sort of like beauty of being like flesh and bone of a certain path, but also being spiritually guided in a different way is interesting. An interesting topic.
Yeah, well, clearly we have a lot to talk about. I think we'll have to do a follow-up. Very interesting topic. I mean, and now in this day and age, it's really deep and fascinating because, like you said, it's not even just Colorado. You're sharing an example of something that connects to every continent. Somebody who has ancestry from Africa, born in the Americas, raised in a Christian tradition from Europe, finds home in an Eastern yogic lineage. So that's like every continent right there. So
totally.
Anyways,
and I literally live in Italy right now, so I don't live in America.
Yeah. Well, I love it. I love it out there. This podcast is helping us build some bridges and the web, the woven connections around the whole world. So thanks for being a part of that. And thank you so much for everything you shared today. It's been really, really enriching and meaningful, and I'm glad to reconnect now. So I hope you have a great time there in your visit, and yeah, let's talk again soon.
Thank you so much. Much love.
Much love. Peace.